Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Chasing the Dream. This professional development episode is on how to unleash the transformational leader within you. And I'm extremely excited to share with you some of the best practices that I've witnessed throughout my 20 years of experience in corporate America, and then the last 16 years as an executive coach and business transformation consultant. So let's dive right into today's learning webinar. Again, today is all about uncovering the transformational leader within you. So let's begin. And I want to start by saying something that on face value sounds pretty obvious, right? Leadership demands character. But when we actually think about what it is, I talk about character in a very specific context. I talk about character in terms of your legacy vis-a-vis impact on other individuals. I'm talking about your innate sense of accomplishment with a very specific focus on how you positively impact people around you. You may have heard the adage, a rising tide lifts all boats. When I talk about strong character, I'm talking about a servant master. I'm talking about somebody who's pathologically oriented to be of service, to care about the people around them, to care about their impact on the world at large. I understand that this may be, as a social construct, a little bit different than when people talk about strong character. That's my caveat. I'm being very transparent up front. So having said that, when we talk about transformational leaders, they're people who are passionate learners. They believe that the moment you stop learning is the point at which you start dying. They've exhibited what Angela Duckworth calls grit, stick-with-itness. They don't see a challenge and potential failure as a negative. They see it as an opportunity to push themselves. They've exhibited some kind of stress, some kind of obstacles in the past, and they've used that resiliency that they basically put it as blood, sweat, and tear equity in the bank to be withdrawn at a later date in terms of referencing. I've been through this before. I got this. As I said before, they're oriented towards service, towards empathy and compassion. So I wrote a book back in 2018 called The Compassionate Organization, and it was predicated on 10 years of research into 200 countries, over 7,000 organizations. I looked at what, if any, characteristics organizations and the individuals who led them shared that enabled these organizations to end up being number 2 or 1 in their respective financial performance in their industries. And regardless of country of origin, regardless of business model, their leadership team, products and services, regardless of any of the other attributes or characteristics, the one attribute that all of the most successful organizations anywhere in the world, they all shared, was a compassionate culture. And that's why my book is called The Compassionate Organization. But strong leaders exhibit a sense of caring. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about a 4P model. So file that away, 4P model. They're honest and transparent, and they're willing to fail greatly, but learn. And I'm going to talk about Carol Dweck's growth mindset at some point. So be on the lookout for this notion of learning, not as failure, but as an opportunity to seize the best attributes in themselves and grow. So they take risks. They take risks because they assess the risk reward. And they understand that in order to leapfrog technology, leapfrog other organizations, leapfrog their competitors, they've got to take risks to leave the world a better place for them having spent time in it. They're creative. And however you define that, in terms of invention, problem solving, product development, feature enhancements, they're creative. Their behaviors, their behavior is what other people pick up on. You can't be a leader without followers, right? It's not possible. So a leader, a transformational leader, inspires the hearts and minds of others. They show the way, they know the way, they go the way. They have a vision and they share it. They see out in the horizon. They can connect the dots in a way that most mere mortals can't. But they're also extremely interested in when their time on earth is done, what's their legacy going to be? Now, people throw around the word leader, I think, far too easily. I hope what you can pick up on from some of the skills that I identify as being transformative in individuals who are bold and crazy enough to think they can change the world. They do it because they're interested in what am I going to leave behind when all is said and done? And that's a legacy. So I want to talk about something that a lot of people that I coach, a lot of people in my consulting, they don't get it. They talk about themselves, they talk about their organization as cultivating leadership. They're really not. It's this whole Jekyll and Hyde of what does leadership mean versus what does management mean. I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to explain it. Management is 20th century. Management is destructive. Management prevents 21st century success. Management is old school. Leadership is what's fundamentally needed now in these transformational, chaotic times to navigate through all the challenges, all the threats, and take advantage of opportunities. This is why I say management is detrimental to success these days. Management, whether it's the Latin mano agere or the French management, it's about controlling. It's about thinking about employees in this outdated notion of assets. Management is about dictating how people work, where they work, when they work, who they work with. It's about control, right? It's still that command control pyramid structure of an industrial age, a long gone era, when you had multiple layers of bureaucracy called middle management that had to separate the senior leadership from the riffraff of frontline client-facing staff. The 21st century is about matrix flat organizations where we get rid of all that management, get rid of it, and we create seamless integration between the leaders at the top and the people who are on the teams with them. Leadership inspires. Leadership is about having a vision. It's about people giving reputational credit to those who they're willing to follow through a burning building. They're willing to follow because they trust and they care. They're following those people who exhibit leadership behaviors. And I always equate leadership today with what we used to call, I have a marketing background, spent 20 years in marketing and advertising. What we used to call in the day, I know half of my advertising is wasted. I just don't know which half. Or the Supreme Court reference of pornography. I don't know how to describe it, but I know it when I see it. It's the sniff test or the vision test. People know leadership. They follow leadership. What is leadership? I may not always be able to articulate it as a frontline staff member. Bet your bippy I'm going to follow somebody who's a leader because I see it in them. And I'm going to go the direction they're going. So I want to just explain very quickly different types of leadership, and sometimes what people think of leadership is actually management. I'm going to walk through them. I'm just going to set the bar in terms of your understanding in full transparency. Every single one of these is neither good nor bad. We're getting away from labeling them. I just want to walk you through, objectively speaking, what the distinctions are at an incredibly generalized level. And then at the very end, I'm going to basically ask you a rhetorical question. So where do you find yourself in the spectrum of these? Autocrat. You know this one. I don't care what your opinion is. Did I ask you for your advice? This is not a democracy. We're going my way. We're going this way. You can either jump on board or you can get off. You're going to accomplish this from me. This needs to be done. I didn't ask you for your advice and counsel. I didn't ask you to participate. This is the way it is. Like it, fine. If not, goodbye. That's the autocrat. Your bureaucrat is somebody who's pathologically oriented towards, like a moth to a flame, rules, procedures, a standard pre-existing way of doing things. They feel comfortable when there's layers of guideline. So you would not want a bureaucrat necessarily leading in an entrepreneurial or chaotic or transformative environment. But in things like government, the bureaucrat thrives in a pre-existing state of condition or a quasi-municipal or public-private ventureship. They like structure. They like a standard way of doing things. The charismatic leader is all about cult of personality. In fact, you see them as cult leaders. They're charismatic, they're socially engaged, they're loquacious. Boy, can they talk. But they have a natural social aura about them. You see this in people who are sociopaths and narcissists. They're incredibly capable of influencing others. That's the charismatic leader. The Democrat or the participative, she or he, they don't feel comfortable rushing to decision. They don't feel comfortable in a dictatorial my way or the highway. Rather, they're willing to take longer to gather consensus. They feel most comfortable when they're collecting perspectives, background, they're soliciting feedback, advice, and counsel. So the process takes longer, but that's okay to them because they want all voices heard. And then when I talked about transformational, you heard some of the skills and characteristics I alluded to earlier. Those who are transformational, and that's what this webinar is all about. Transformational leaders see the world in a different way. They see the world, check this out, as it could be. And they're not comfortable with rules. They're not comfortable with the existing state of the world. They need to change it. Laissez-faire from the French, leave it alone, delegated. A laissez-faire manager won't interfere. A laissez-faire delegated manager says, oh, you have an idea to do it? I won't get in your way. Go right ahead. They don't ultimately take responsibility. If the people who are delegated to report to them underneath them take a risk and something bad happens, they're incredibly comfortable throwing said individual under the bus. They're comfortable giving up a little bit of control, but they're not willing to support their individuals. They're not willing, you never hear them say, I've got your back. It's feel free, go right ahead. Implicit in that, you know the repercussions. If something goes wrong, I'm not going to take the blame. I like my job here. People, relations oriented. One of the worst things you can do to them, the Chinese proverb of death by 1,000 cuts, is stick a relations oriented leader in a cubicle in the corner and don't allow them to have humanistic interaction. They not only want it, they need it. It's their manna, their sustenance. They need to be oriented. You may have heard in the 1980s of a phrase called management by walking around. They're the kind of people who need those human touch points. You may see them constantly going to other people's cubicle, constantly messaging people in Slack. They're the ones who are constantly scheduling video conference calls when you're working virtually. They're the ones who are oriented towards coming back to the office on a hybrid or full-time schedule because they need the human interaction. The servant leader is somebody who is born to serve. You may have seen that in their CV, in their dossier. They were in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. They were, in volunteer work, community engagement. They were involved with Habitat for Humanity or Doctors Without Borders. I mean, the list goes on, but servant leaders care most when they're being of service to their peers. They volunteer for coaching and mentoring programs. They bring local high school students in to give them a tour of your facility. Task-oriented are people who are focused on getting work done. You may see them with their to-do lists. You may see them with their spreadsheets, with Microsoft Project. You may see them under every project they've assigned owners and contributors with start and end dates and descriptions of all the actions and contingencies. Man, they love at the end of the day and the end of the week to check stuff off. And one of the worst things you can do to them is have an uncompleted task carry forward. Transactional is, don't think like bank transaction. Transactional are people that They don't want conversation. They don't want participation. Transactional are focused on, in the same way task-oriented is, this is what we're doing. They don't debate. They don't solicit. They tell you. Communication is one direction. This is what's in front of us. This is what you need to do. Go do it. Figure it out. We have until Friday. Get it done. Report back. So they're very, very matter of fact. And then there's the final one you may have recalled. I said this before. The 4P model. And what is that? It's a way of thinking about transformational leaders in terms of the totality of how they see their engagement, their place in the world, and their responsibility to touch all relevant stakeholders. The sense of purpose. They're the very, very big proponents in your organization or crafting or revisiting your vision, mission statements, your values and your code of conduct and your core principles. I said before that the transformational leaders have this thing called legacy. What's your individual leadership purpose and what's the organization's purpose? Planet. They're focused on sustainability, about passing off to millennials, Gen Zs, and alphas as future generations, passing off a more healthy planet. They're the ones who care about things like climate control. You know, Yvon Chouinard, founder of Patagonia, giving over $3 billion in his family revenue into a fund to combat climate change. They're focused on the planet. And then people. There's a sense of caring about people. The last P, the fourth P, is what's called probity. And it's just a fancy old word for doing good, doing no harm, and doing good initiatives, deeds, having a positive impact. It's a moral compass, quite frankly. It's your North Star towards ethical behavior. So now, I mentioned it before, where are you? Remember, there was no, I attempted to place no value judgment on any of those that I've described, but just to understand you in terms of any kind of growth potential you're looking forward to as a leader, but also understanding the impact of yourself on others, is where are you in the spectrum in terms of from transactional to transformational? And it's okay, just navigate. It's not a value statement. Just figure out where you feel most comfortable in your engagement, your preferred communication style, and interaction with others around you. So where are you in the spectrum of transactional to transformational, and from democratic, participative, all the way up to the dictatorial autocrat? And the way that you know this is hire somebody like me, I'm a personality assessment tool called DISC. I'm DISC certified. Hire a coach to come in and do an assessment for you and your leadership team, and then figure out the deltas or disconnects between communication breakpoints, or why there may be a lack of communication between certain members on your team and or inherent conflict. So where are you? So now that we say that, what makes a leader great? Where does this list come from? It's not a chat GBT. This list is built upon my 35 years of experience, 20 in the corporate sector, 15, 16 as a consultant working with over 500 organizations. So it's an incredibly subjective list based on my personal and professional experience. Having said that, they feel comfortable with decision-making responsibility. They don't pass the buck. They don't look for others to blame. It's on them. And they support their team members when a decision is made by them, and or they empower their team to make decisions. They support those decisions. They don't make decisions that aren't theirs. So in other words, when I talk about one of the greatest privileges you can do to build an amazing workforce is to empower your employees and give them full control or autonomy, I don't believe that a leader says, I should and must decide for you, my employee, how you do your work, when you do it, where you do it, or who you do it with. And this is the whole Daniel Pink model. I'm giving you autonomy because you're the ones who are closest to the work. You have to make the decisions and feel comfortable with them. They don't label things as right or wrong. They look at alternatives. It's a very Socratic approach. They take almost a debate mindset. They take oppositional viewpoints just to not be contrarian and difficult, but they look for alternatives to do basically contingency planning. If then, if this happens, then we have the following three scenarios. What are the pros and cons of each? Go and do the research. Let's kind of debate them. They make their decisions on paper first. They document them. They may engage other people for advice and counsel or to solicit input, but then ultimately, when it's time to make a decision, they've got it documented. I want to talk about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is an incredibly powerful field. The grandfather, Daniel Goleman, came up with this social construct of a four-stage process. And the beauty of emotional intelligence is we practice it every second of the day. It's a part of our lives and every interaction with every relationship, personal and professional. And the beauty is you perform this constantly four-step ritual, four-step dance. So here we go. Here's emotional intelligence. Apologies. The first step is, how am I feeling? Doing an audit of my emotional state right in this very moment. How am I feeling in the moment? Why? That's called emotional awareness, self-awareness, stage one. We do that so that we can successfully navigate towards stage two, which is self-regulation, self-management. Okay, I happen to be feeling this because, but now we go to the management stage. I know that this will pass. I know that as soon as I get this work done, I get to delegate it. As soon as I get this done, I can kind of outsource it or move on to the next phase. I'll be okay for the next few weeks. And even if I'm not, I know it's short term. So that self-management is a precursor second step before we move up to the third level, which is social awareness. Once I'm capable of controlling my emotions, I now can be more of a servant master. I can be more aware of people around me, socially aware of my peers, the people I coach and mentor, the people I work with. I'm socially aware once I'm capable of getting control of my own emotional construct. I can be socially aware so that I can then, after stage three, move into what's called social management. I can control the bad word. I can contribute meaningfully in relationships with others. But I have to make sure my own emotional house is in order first. And so everybody, when they hear this four-step process and they hear social management, stage four, they say, oh, that's emotional intelligence. No, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this four-step process. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. And they all have to be performed. And the beauty is, if you're not familiar with this, in another second, it's okay. It's going to start over again. So it's a constant lifelong pursuit. It's not a destination. It's a journey. And if you ever read the book, or if you haven't, Working with Emotional Intelligence, it's phenomenal. So the next step I want to talk about in terms of transformational leaders is they understand in their core that to build a learning organization is critical to individual and collective ability to adapt and transform. See, training isn't enough. And I have to laugh when clients bring me in and train on a little piece of something. This department, customer care, we're going to do active listening. That is literally the Chinese proverb of when you get an elephant and everybody's blindfolded and you touch the elephant and you feel different parts, you see different things. Oh, you touch the tusk, it's a spear. You touch the hide, the rump, and it's rough. Oh, that's a roof. You touch the foot, the leg of the elephant, if it allows you to, it's a tree trunk. No, we're all of the different training and development. The responsibility is not the individuals to acquire skills for any given roles and responsibilities in their current job. The whole point of a learning organization is holistically to look up and down, across, in and out, and constantly figure out how you are building out an organic culture that rewards, recognizes, encourages, allows people to learn from resources, from peers, from coaches, from professional development, from networking, in affiliations, gaining certifications and accreditations. going back to school, micro learning, which is little snippet 5 and 10-minute training sessions. It's the collection of all of the required actions needed to create an in and out, up and down across learning organization. And what I want to say is learning organizations understand they have to recruit people with certain talents and skills. They want to seek in behavioral interviewing people who possess leadership attributes. People who, I'll talk a little bit later about it, but they're critical thinkers, they're problem solvers, they're creatives. You may have heard me use these words already frequently. You want to identify the people who are leaders in your organization, not just sales or people who are being fast-tracked for management. People who can lead at all levels. You give them the guidance, support that they need to evolve into their existing role as you are working with them from literally their orientation, right? From the moment you onboard them, you're working proactively on their career and professional development plan, which they have ownership of, but you're giving them the resources, tools, guidance they need to accomplish everything. You deliver the collective set of all the training, development, tools, resources, people, everything each employee needs when they need it. So it's customized at being most productive for them. And then you have now started to, congratulations, build a growth mindset. And so I want to talk a little bit about, if you haven't read it, Carol Dweck's Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. She's a researcher, a psychologist. She's spent decades looking at people across all different generations, with artists, athletes, business owners, people who exhibited one of two kinds of mindset, fixed or growth. And that was the seminal work she and her researchers accomplished, starting out by looking at adolescents, children, as young as the age of 5, and seeing who were most likely to be successful and why, and who wasn't. And we know from her seminal research that people of a certain ilk, we call them growth mindset. They weren't afraid of failure. They didn't even think in terms of failure when they were faced with a difficult challenge. They saw it as an opportunity, a gift of sorts to challenge themselves. And the notion of success and failure had nothing to do with accomplishment or lack of accomplishment. It was the pure joy and engagement and, being in a state of flow where they were fully, actively engaged in the moment. The challenge itself provided its own reward. Those are people who, no matter what challenge or stumbling block or roadblock they faced, they would be successful in any venture because they always saw a challenge as an opportunity. Whereas people with a fixed mindset were very easily discouraged. They discouraged themselves, their head trash that they told themselves was fear of failure. I don't want to be judged by others as lacking. I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to put myself out there. And you can imagine and read the book, but people have a fixed mindset when they get into management, they create a culture of stasis or being stuck, or, as Jim Collins said, good is the enemy of great. You want great. You want transformational leaders to take over responsibility for moving your organization forward. They all possess a common trait of a growth mindset. You only get one. It's not nature and nurture. Some people, yes, are born with behavioral tendency towards one versus the other, but through practice, we can get from fixed to growth mindset. And the view we have of ourselves, we've adopted of ourselves, affects how we approach or choose not to approach challenges. Effort is its own reward. We relish in a growth mindset the challenge. Bring it on. Failure, if I don't achieve it, that's just an opportunity to learn and grow. I want to talk about labeling others. See, here's something that I don't think enough people understand, and they're managers, but leaders get it. When we put a label on somebody, we literally affect every attribute of them in our relationship with them, which then reinforces the label we used. That's the Pygmalion effect. So start out with whether it's a coworker, a peer, somebody that you've managed, a direct report, doesn't matter. You have a pre-existing set of labels for that individual, right? And those labels that you use, those beliefs about others, influence our actions towards them. And our actions towards them, I haven't said good or bad yet. I'm just saying our beliefs about other people, our labels we give them, influence how we act towards them, which has an impact on them and how they see themselves, which in turn causes them to adjust, modify, course correct their engagement with us, which simply reinforces the labels we put on them. So you can see in this holistic kind of self-fulfilling framework that when we go into new relationships, one of the most damning things we can do is rush to judgment. We want to give people grace. In the same way we choose to give ourselves grace, we have to hold off on labels which can be debilitating in terms of relationship cultivation. And as a leader, as a transformational leader, we have to understand this process intimately. So who are you? What makes you imminently somebody to follow? I've talked about emotional intelligence as a four-step process. Practice it. Self-awareness, self-management or regulation, social awareness, social management. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4, cha-cha, emotional intelligence. But what are your strengths and opportunities for growth? Be brutally honest, because you know yourself in full transparency better than anybody else knows. You really do. And regardless of your blind spots, those psychological kind of hidden views that we don't necessarily always consciously identify things about ourselves, but seek out advice and counsel from others who know you well. How would they describe you? Literally ask for a word cloud. Ask 5 or 6 individuals you know incredibly well. What are the 4 or 5 one-word adjectives you use to describe them? So while you're gathering that set of one-word adjectives, write down a list of key adjectives, one-worders, that you wish other people would use to think about and refer to you. And then match the degree of closeness or delta difference between their list and yours. And that's the degree of authenticity you've achieved. Be a role model. That's what authentic leadership, transformational leadership is about. I can't be a leader if you don't want to follow. So I want to emulate behavior of people following me, which is ethical. I talked about the 4P: planet, people, probity. It's all about being authentic. You cannot be anybody else, but you can aspire to be the best version of yourself. Your actions should mirror your words. In fact, if you are the kind of person who's ever used the phrase, do as I say, not as I do, you fail. Truth. So how would you plan this out? And my thank you for listening through this entire webinar. My thank you is a one-on-one hourly consult where I'm happy to go through your planning process on your own transformational leadership plan. Write down, this is calendar end of 2024. We're heading into 2025. Write down what you want to accomplish in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, year, by quarter. What is your plan as a leader? What's your vision? Your vision of yourself, your vision of your career, your vision of your professional development. Share it with people who are close to you personally, professionally, and who care about you, your VIP brand ambassadors who want to see you succeed. And then taking charge, lead by example. In other words, I'm a marketing guy, so do a SWOT. What are your strengths and weaknesses? That's you. What are external opportunities and threats? An opportunity may be solicit coaching, find a mentor. An opportunity may be a peer advisory group. It may be a professional association. And threats are competitors, new technology, a shifting business climate, changing consumer preferences. But again, strengths, weaknesses are your internal, what makes you unique and valuable, memorable, your brand. And external is outside factors. I'm going to say this right now. I talked earlier about leadership versus management. Management's detrimental, it's 20th century, leadership is 21st. Self-leadership is the future. So you have tens of thousands of boomers and matures leaving the workforce every day. You can fight it, you deny it, truth. And in their place, you have these life forms, these creatures called millennials and Gen Zs coming in and taking over leadership roles. Their whole expectation of employer-employer contract and the nature of work and how they want to work collaboratively is fundamentally different. You can either howl at the moon or you can embrace this new 21st century self-leadership model. Organizations must allow people to lead themselves. You may say, well, that would be great if we trusted them. You don't trust them, that's on you for hiring subpar candidates. Oops. Hire the best, and then it should be a heck of a lot easier to trust them and empower them because you've hired leaders. Self-leaders care about their legacy. They're problem solvers, they're critical thinkers, they're eminently creative. They can work effectively on teams, but they're driven by intrinsic motivation. It's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talked about being in a state of flow, okay? They set priorities, they achieve them, they work independently, but they also love to work collaboratively. Juxtaposition, not for transformational leaders. Delegation is an art form, but there's a science to it. So you can perfect delegation. The reason for it, why do it, is it builds trust. If you hire stars, it's constantly giving them challenges. Remember growth mindset? They love a challenge. Delegation is a way to give them new roles, responsibilities by assigning tasks that enable you to cross-train them, which builds in an effective bench. You're building a stronger bench because you have all the requisite talent you need internally, and it minimizes the amount of external hiring you have to do. And you coach and mentor it, and then when you delegate work, that should be captured into their performance management planning process, which, by the way, you don't own. What? You don't own each employee's PMP, they do. You're just a resource. So when I sit down once a year and tell them bullshit, you're not sitting down with them, they're sitting down with you and they're telling what they need from you. Because remember, you're a leader, you're not a manager. How do you decide when and how to delegate? What's the best use of your time? You know, it's that whole Stephen Covey or Eisenhower matrix of priority 1, 2, 3, 4. Anything that's a 3, you delegate. Anything that's a 4, you get rid of. Can someone else do it better? Do they have proficiency? That determines the who you give it to. Do you have enough time to delegate? A lot of people, and man, talk about myopic kind of silly thinking. I don't know if it takes too long to explain it. Well, that might be fine if it's a one-off, one-time recurring task. But if it's repetitive in nature, the amount of times you literally do it yourself, you're losing time because you can just sit and calmly explain it for however long it takes, and now you've delegated it. Should I delegate? Should I own this or allow somebody else to do it? But avoid the boomerang. What do I mean by that? The minute you give it out, it's theirs for ownership. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations, you're a leader. Woohoo! Now what? The whole notion of transformational leadership is they're servant masters. They're predicated on a pathological need to serve, which means listen hard. What does that mean? God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Your job as a transformational leader is to earn trust and keep earning trust. Trust is a really funny thing. It can take a lifetime to build it and 1 moment to lose it. Goes for individual relationships and organizations dealing with their people. So you have to keep earning their trust. And change is constant. I know you've heard that a gazillion times, but we have to embrace change, not run from it. Share leadership. One of the worst things you can do is still stick with this outdated pyramid command control model. It's dead. You know, reporting mechanisms, layers of management, functional departments, C-suite, that's dead. You may not know it, but it's dead. And it should not exist anymore in your organization. Self-directed teams is the way to go in flatter matrix organizations where we strip out all that unnecessary offensive layers of bureaucracy and management. Leadership is to be desired, and you should work aggressively to develop it. So I encourage you, when we sit down, as my courtesy thank you for attending or watching tonight's webinar, and we schedule some one-on-one time, I hope you took some questions down. Questions fuel debate. Questions fuel a deeper understanding. If your actions inspire other people, think about this. If your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and become more, you are a leader. I mean, that's it. That's literally, let's cut to the chase. And so having said that, we move on to look inside yourself. I want to talk about the value of constantly challenging yourself. One of the things that I started doing early on in my career, in my 20s, when I worked in corporate America, was I realized pretty quickly the managers did not have a vested interest or were not capable of navigating my career and professional performance. And so I took that responsibility off their plate. We would sit down and I would have already given them every month, because I'd schedule monthlies and then quarterlies with my managers. I would hand them a performance management plan for them to be aware of what I was holding myself accountable to. But wait, didn't they have goals that they set for you? They did, and the goals were various degrees of realistic or foolish. My goals and your goals for yourself are fundamentally, or should be, fundamentally more intense than anything anybody else expects from you. Nobody else knows the true capability of you, but you as a servant leader, you as a transformational leader, are constantly thinking about your legacy tomorrow and well into the future. What does this mean today? As my thank you for attending today's webinar, I want to point out something that we don't say to ourselves enough. You know, in the field of psychology, there's a phrase called head trash. And what does that mean? It means that a majority of everything we say to ourselves about ourselves is negative. What the hell? There's another way of saying that. If we spoke to other people the way we typically talk to ourselves, we'd have no friends. Start to realize the awesomeness of you. There's an understanding in the transformational leader that where they are today may have various degrees or almost no bearing on where they're going to. They have a view of a vision of themselves and their development. And it's all about the expectation that they may not achieve being extraordinary, but they're in the pursuit of it. And that's the beauty of pursuing transformational leadership for yourself, for your leadership team, for every individual, whether you're a graphic design firm of 7 employees or a multinational corporation with 70,000. That's culture. That's creating a baseline expectation that any person in your organization can and should want to be able to pursue being extraordinary. It's a powerful culture. So thank you. Thank you for attending this webinar on how to become a transformational leader. I want to share with you that there's a YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. I've developed over 430 videos just like this for you and your people's career, professional development, team building, communication, conflict resolution. It's all there. So please go check out my YouTube channel, the Chazen Group LLC. While you're there, be sure to subscribe. Check out all the different playlists. I have 2 seasons of podcasts on my amazing workplace culture podcast, Chasing the Dream. I would really, really appreciate you checking it out. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe. My thank you for attending today's webinar. Reach out to me to connect on LinkedIn, email me, or give me a holler. And what I want to do is schedule your complimentary transformational leader coaching session. So thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy hectic schedule to be with me. I wish you much success in your future career and professional pursuits.